So this is class 142B on the Golden Doves. We're on page 80, and first of all, welcome to Torah Andalus for those of you who are new to the channel. On this channel, we study Torah in a way that I would call non-familiar. By non-familiar, I mean Talmud Torah, la'asok b'Torah means to engage yourself mentally in what you're reading. And as we read yesterday, when something is familiar, you're not really studying. So if you're reading something and say, yeah, I know what this means, I know this, yeah, I kind of know that, right, of course I know that. That's not Talmud Torah. Right? It's nice, it's nothing, I'm not against it, of course. But Talmud Torah means to engage your mind and actually immerse yourself in the process of thinking, right? And when you immerse yourself in the process of thinking, right, that's very different than just reading something familiar that you kind of think you know, right? So we're studying something difficult, and even before I start reading what I'm about to read, which is page 80 on the Golden Doves, it has to do with the name of God. I'm a little hesitant to read this part and to explain it on this YouTube channel. So I'm going to read it. I'm going to explain it partially, because as you know, there's a limitation to what may or may not be taught in a public manner, right? So that's why that I needed to explain my hesitancy to teach what I'm about to teach, right? So I don't mean this in a mystical. No, it's just a question of following the halakha, right? So there's certain things that may not be taught in a public manner. So how did Harambam write the Moneh Nebuchim? That's a public book. So there's a certain thought process in the Moneh Nebuchim, and only those few who can go through the thought process will understand what Harambam is saying. So it's not a public manner of teaching. That's the way the Moneh was done. Okay, let's start, page 80. Negation of a ma'ana common to God and man ought not to be interpreted as meaning that he is void of ma'ana. That's important. So we brought yesterday the example of Raglei Hashem. So Raglai means something that supports you, right? You're supported by the legs. The legs make you stand, right? So when you use the word Raglei Hashem in the case of God, you're using the isim, the bare dictionary meaning of the word, which just means the legs, but not the ma'ana, because the ma'ana of legs is something that supports you. And of course, in the context of Hashem, that's a ludicrous and blasphemous statement. Nothing supports God. So that's the idea of using the isim, but not the ma'ana. So it's a type of mashal. So it comes out that the word Raglei Hashem is pointing out to something outside the normal or the conventional semantic field of legs, right? Something outside. And Harambam discusses that in the Moneh Nebuchim, what that something is, right? So there is no common denominator between God and man. Because God is the creator. And he exists before the yesh. So his realm of existence is something that we have no comprehension of. Even to use the word existence, right? What we know as existence is in the yesh. It's not in the ayin. So his existence surpasses that, right? So therefore there is no common ma'ana between God and man. However, it doesn't mean that there isn't a ma'ana to God. It means whatever the ma'ana is, whatever the concept is, that concept is not shared with anything in the yesh. God exists in the ayin and in the yesh equally. So there is no common denominator between God and man, or God and any of his creations, right? But there is a ma'ana there. indeed, God has ma'ana. Hanabam says so explicitly. And therefore, he understands himself, right? So God is the only mind that has full understanding of what God is, what he is, right? So there is a ma'ana there, and God understands that ma'ana. Rambam writes this in the Moned Vuchim in chapter 68. The tetragrammaton is the isim of this ma'ana. Okay, so you have the Shem HaMeforash, or Shem HaMeforash. So the Shem HaMeforash, there's different names for God. The other names of God, they imply a commonality. For example, the word Elokim. So it could be used for judges and it's used for God because there's some sort of commonality in the idea expressed by Elohim or Elokim in the former judges, in the latter God, because God does act as a judge. But the Shem HaMeforash is the isim of that ma'ana for which there is no commonality. Meaning, no word points out towards that unique ma'ana, whatever it is, right? We say that God has a ma'ana and God is aware of his ma'ana and God knows what he is. There's no word that can point towards that direction. The Shem HaMeforash does. Since he is one, in the sense of being absolutely unique and absolutely incomposite, his ma'ana is also absolutely unique and therefore inaccessible to anyone but himself. Right. When we say Hashem Echad, we don't just mean there's one God. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Of course, there is only one God. But this God is completely unique than anything else that exists. Because the existence of this one God is above any other existence in so much as it requires nothing for its existence. The creations require a creator. And therefore, they exist. The creations do. But at a lower level. The creator exists not by virtue of anything else. Right? So he's absolutely unique and absolutely incomposite. Right? There's no parts. Of course. There's a left side, there's a right side, there's a up, there's a down. None of that exists. Right? Are there attributes? Really? Are there? Because there's God, and then there's an attribute. Is that correct? Right. So he's incomposite. His ma'ana is also absolutely unique, as we said. So he is unique, and therefore, of course, his ma'ana is absolutely unique, and therefore inaccessible to anyone but himself. So nobody can understand God as he is to himself. Of course, that whole idea that somehow we can, connect with God at that level, No. Vera'ita et ahorai ufanai lo yera'u. You can see the back of God, whatever that means. Not the panim. Right? Not as God is to himself. There is a twofold objective in the negation of ma'ana. So, when we negate ma'ana from God, other than that one ma'ana which the Shem HaMeforash points out towards, there's two reasons why we negate ma'ana from God. First, to ascertain God's oneness and uniqueness. And secondly, in the function of a syntagmatic character of ma'ana. As a semantic entity, ma'ana acquires significance through opposition and contrast. All right, let's read that again. First of all, if we were to say that there is Raglei Hashem, or that Hashem is Erech HaPayim, in the sense Erech HaPayim as we are Erech HaPayim, if we are, and we should be, that means that there is a commonality. And that means that Hashem is not Ehad, Chas v'Shalom. He's not unique, Chas v'Shalom. Because, here, look, God has this and we have this. That's the first reason. We have this negative understanding of God, or we negate the ma'anas from those descriptions of God. And second, there's a certain syntagmatic character of ma'ana. There's a certain, I'll give you an example. Let's think in terms of binaries. So you say, Hashem is Gadol. Let's take the ma'ana of Gadol. Really big, occupies a lot of space. That would suggest that he could be Katan, but instead he's Gadol. That's incorrect. God's existence is beyond any of that. Another example of a syntagmatic opposition and contrast. You say, El Hay V'Kayam, God has life. If you take it in the regular ma'ana of life, life is a binary. There's life and there's death. So this could be alive, and it could be dead, but it's alive. That's a mistake. There is no syntagmatic character to God's ma'ana. Right? As a semantic entity, ma'ana acquires significance through opposition and contrast, which would be incorrect to apply towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's why we say Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. He's distant, completely distant. Although God's ma'ana is inaccessible in positive terms, so now we know why, man can grasp his quiddity right. So on the one hand, right. So God's ma'ana, whatever that ma'ana is that we said that the Shem HaMeforash points to, you can't have a positive knowledge of that. So don't even try. But we can understand something about God's quiddity. Quiddity means his essence, but my father was using the word quiddity here in terms of Mesi'ut Hashem, his existence. Give me a moment here. There's a marking on the side of the book, which I cannot quite see. See, I'm going to have to look at this later. Yeah, existence. existence, quiddity. It's a philosophical term. What is the essence that makes something unique? Right? So we can grasp that Hashem is echad, right? The meaning of this will be clearer upon considering the dialectical nature of person. Okay, that's enough for one class.